I watched the same cup of tea grow cold on my kitchen counter. The rain tapped against the window, turning the afternoon light gray and dull. My phone buzzed on the counter, the third time in the last hour. Probably Sarah again. 6 months had passed since Tyler left. 6 months since I'd realized what a fool I'd been. The doctors had warned about recovery time after the surgery, but they'd never mentioned the emptiness that would follow. The hollow feeling that had nothing to do with my missing kidney and everything to do with waking up alone. I checked my phone. 2 texts from Sarah, 1 from Mom. I swiped them away without reading. My therapist, Dr. Marshall, would call this avoidant behavior, another term from her arsenal of clinical vocabulary that somehow made me feel both seen and misunderstood at the same time. Speaking of Dr. Marshall, I glanced at the clock. I was supposed to be sitting in her Somerville office in exactly 45 minutes. The thought of digging through another hour of my mistakes made my chest tighten. I reached for my phone and tapped out a quick message canceling our session. The 3rd time this month. The apartment walls pressed in around me. I needed air, even rain-soaked air. I grabbed my jacket and bag and headed out, with no destination in mind beyond not here. The streets of Back Bay glistened with rain. I walked with my head down, dodging umbrellas and puddles. Newberry Street was busy despite the weather, shop windows glowing against the gray backdrop. I passed clothing boutiques and cafes filled with people who somehow managed to make getting coffee look like a joyful social ritual rather than a necessary transaction. I paused at a crosswalk, water collecting in my shoes, when I noticed a small storefront I'd never paid attention to before. A bookstore, not one of those slick chains with bestseller displays and coffee bars, but something more intimate. A hand-painted sign read, "Annotated Pages." Through the window I could see warm light spilling over wooden shelves. The rain intensified, and I darted inside before the light changed. The bell above the door jingled softly as I entered. The sound of rain faded, replaced by the particular quiet that belongs only to bookstores, a silence made of paper and thought. The air smelled of old books and new ink, with hints of cinnamon from somewhere in the back. Wooden shelves stretched from floor to ceiling, creating narrow aisles that twisted deeper into the store. Reading nooks with worn armchairs were tucked into corners, each with its own lamp casting a pool of amber light. No one occupied the chairs, but a mug of something steaming sat on a small table beside one, evidence of a reader temporarily absent. I moved through the aisles, running my fingers along the spines like I was reading Braille. Fiction gave way to philosophy, then history, then poetry. I stopped there, drawn to a display of collected works. I hadn't read poetry since college, since before Tyler, before I'd convinced myself I was in love, before I'd convinced myself that love meant sacrifice. I reached for a slim volume on a high shelf, my fingers just brushing the spine. As I stretched, my elbow knocked against several neighboring books. They tumbled down in a cascade, hitting the wooden floor with soft, overlapping thuds. "Shit," I muttered, crouching to gather them. "Need a hand with that avalanche?" a voice asked. I looked up to see a man kneeling beside me, already collecting books. He wore a dark green sweater with the sleeves pushed up to his elbows, revealing forearms marked with a few small ink stains. Not Tyler's type of ink, not the precise geometric tattoos that Tyler had spent hours choosing for their significance, but actual ink, as if he'd been writing by hand. "Sorry about that," I said, stacking the books I'd gathered. "I've apparently lost all coordination." "Happens to me at least twice a day," he replied. "I'm convinced these shelves are secretly adjustable and move just enough to cause chaos." He handed me the last fallen book. "I'm Jamie, by the way, Jamie Anderson. This is my shop." There was something about him I couldn't immediately place. Not the confident charm that had first drawn me to Tyler. That magnetic pull that made everyone in a room orient toward him like flowers to the sun. Jamie had something quieter, a kind of stillness that held my attention without demanding it. "Emily," I said, accepting the book. "Nice to meet you, Emily. Were you looking for anything specific, or just browsing?" I hesitated. "I'm not sure. Something different, I guess." Jamie nodded as if this vague answer made perfect sense. "Different from what you usually read, or different from how you're feeling?" The question caught me off guard. "Both, maybe." He considered this, then moved to a different shelf and pulled out a book with a blue cover. "You might like this. Contemporary poetry, but not the Instagram kind that's really just self-help with line breaks." The corner of his mouth quirked up. Though sometimes we need that too. I took the book, our fingers brushing briefly. The cover read, "Salvage" by a poet I'd never heard of. "Thanks," I said, not committing to more than holding it. "We actually have a reading circle every Tuesday evening, which happens to be today. Starts at 7 if you're interested. No pressure to participate. Most people just listen." My automatic response formed, a polite decline, an excuse about prior commitments that didn't exist. But something made me hesitate. Maybe it was Dr. Marshall's voice in my head talking about pattern interruption, or maybe it was just the rain outside making the thought of returning to my empty apartment seem particularly bleak. "Maybe," I said. "I'll think about it." Jamie smiled. Not the dazzling grin that Tyler used like currency, but something gentler. "Well, I hope you do. In the meantime, feel free to look around. Coffee and tea are in the back if you'd like some." He returned to whatever he'd been doing before my literary landslide, leaving me with the blue book in my hands. I found one of the reading nooks and sat down, opening to a random page. The poem there was about a woman rebuilding a boat piece by piece, salvaging what she could from the wreck. I read it twice, then checked the time. 5 hours until the reading started. I could leave now, go home, retreat. The safe choice. Instead, I turned the page. I read until my eyes burned, moving from the blue book to others I pulled from nearby shelves. The rain continued outside, drumming against the windows in irregular patterns. People came and went, shaking umbrellas and browsing briefly before returning to the wet world outside. I stayed. At 6:45, Jamie appeared beside my chair. "Sorry to interrupt, but we're setting up for the reading if you'd still like to join." I looked up, disoriented. The windows showed darkness now, the street transformed into a canvas of reflected lights and shadow. "Oh," I said. "I lost track of time." "Best compliment a bookstore can get," Jamie replied. He gestured toward the back of the store, where chairs were being arranged in a loose circle. "No pressure, but you're welcome to join. The prudent thing would be to leave now, to pay for the blue book I'd been reading and retreat to familiar isolation." But the hours spent in this warm, book-lined space had softened something in me, making my apartment seem less like refuge and more like a cell. "Okay," I said. "I'll stay." The reading area filled gradually with about a dozen people. I took a seat in the back corner, half hidden by a tall shelf of reference books. The conversations around me flowed with the casual back and forth of regulars, questions about jobs and families, inside jokes about past readings. I contemplated leaving 3 separate times, but each time something held me in place. Jamie welcomed everyone from a stool at the front, explaining the format. People could read their own work or something they'd discovered, followed by brief, supportive discussion. No critiques, no workshops, just sharing. Several people read. A silver-haired woman with a poem about gardening that was clearly about grief. A young man with thick glasses who read something abstract about urban life. A middle-aged woman whose poem about her daughter leaving for college made my throat tighten unexpectedly. Then Jamie took his turn. He held the blue book I'd been reading earlier, Salvage, and turned to a different poem than the one I'd found. "This one's called Resilience," he said, and began to read. His voice changed when he read, taking on depth without performance. The poem described the journey of a small boat through a storm, battered but remaining afloat through adaptations and repairs made by its single occupant. The final lines describe dawn breaking over still turbulent waters, with the boat continuing its course, damaged but seaworthy, transformed but intact. Something stirred inside me as I listened. Not the sharp pain I'd grown accustomed to when thinking about loss, but something warmer and less defined. Not hope exactly, but perhaps the possibility of hope. The sense that continuing didn't necessarily mean forgetting. After the reading ended, people lingered, talking in small groups. I remained in my corner, unsure of the protocol. Jamie made his way around the circle, exchanging words with everyone. When he reached me, he sat in the chair beside mine. "So, what did you think?" "I liked it," I said. "The poem about resilience, it wasn't what I expected." "How so?" I searched for words. "It didn't pretend the damage never happened. The boat was still broken in places, just still floating." Jamie nodded. "That's what drew me to it, too. There's a lot of poetry about healing that suggests we return to some pristine former state. I don't think that's how it works." "No," I agreed, "it's not. We talked about books as the others gradually left, about poetry and fiction, about authors we admired and ones we couldn't understand despite multiple attempts. Jamie had read everything, it seemed, but without pretension. He spoke about pulp mysteries with the same enthusiasm as Russian classics. The conversation flowed without effort, carrying us past closing time until we were the only ones left in the shop. "I should probably let you close up," I said, noticing the time. Jamie looked surprised, then checked his watch. "Oh wow, it's late. Sorry about that. I tend to lose track of time when talking about books." "Me too," I admitted. He stood and began turning off some of the lights while I gathered my things. At the counter, I pulled out my wallet to pay for salvage, which I'd decided to buy. "First one's on the house," Jamie said, waving away my card. "Think of it as a welcome to the reading circle. You are coming back next week, aren't you?" The question hung in the air, casual but weighted. An invitation back to the world. "I might," I said, which was more commitment than I'd given to anything in months. Outside, the rain had stopped, leaving the streets wet and reflective. Jamie locked the shop behind us. "Which way are you headed?" he asked. "Toward the river," I replied. "Me too. Mind if I walk with you?" We walked along Newbury Street toward the Charles River, passing closed shops and restaurants still bright with late diners. Jamie talked about how he'd opened the bookstore 3 years ago after moving from Chicago, while I offered the barest outline of my life as an editor at a small publishing house. I carefully avoided any mention of Tyler or hospitals or the past year entirely. The river appeared ahead, dark water moving beneath the lights of the city. A cool breeze came off the water, carrying the scent of wet earth and stone. For the first time in months, I caught myself smiling. Not performing happiness for someone else's comfort, but actually feeling a brief, genuine lightness. We parted at Commonwealth Avenue, where our paths diverged. "Thanks for coming today," Jamie said. "I hope we'll see you next Tuesday." "Thanks for the book," I replied, holding up salvage. "Let me know what you think of the rest of it." Walking the remaining blocks to my apartment, I felt different somehow. Not healed, not even close, but perhaps slightly more porous, as if some of the protective shell I'd built had developed a small opening, letting in a bit of fresh air. Inside my apartment, I set the book on my nightstand and pulled out my phone. Sarah's earlier texts were still there, unanswered, an invitation to brunch that weekend, followed by gentle concern at my silence. 6 months of these messages, 6 months of my avoidance. I typed a reply before I could talk myself out of it. "Sorry for the late response. Brunch sounds good. Let me know when and where." I hit send and set the phone down, my chest tight with this small step back toward connection. Outside my window, the city continued its nighttime rhythm. Cars passing, lights changing, people moving through their lives. For the first time in a long while, I felt like one of them again. Not quite whole, but present. Not quite healed, but perhaps, like the boat in the poem, still seaworthy. I woke to sunlight slanting through blinds I'd forgotten to close. The blue book, Salvage, lay open beside me where I'd fallen asleep reading. My phone buzzed from somewhere in the tangled sheets. Sarah, confirming our brunch plans for Sunday at Tati Bakery. 3 days had passed since the reading at Annotated Pages. 3 days of turning Jamie's voice over in my mind, the way he'd read that poem about the battered boat still afloat at dawn. I texted Sarah back, "See you at 11. 4 words, but they felt significant, a small opening in the wall I'd built. The bookstore pulled me back the following Tuesday. I told myself it was the poetry circle, not Jamie, but when I spotted him shelving books in the history section, my heart skipped in a way that both thrilled and terrified me. "Emily," he said, his face brightening, "you came back." "I finished the book," I replied, pulling Salvage from my bag. The excuse sounded flimsy even to me. "And?" I liked how it ended. Not fixed, but forward-moving. His eyes held mine a beat longer than necessary. "Exactly." That evening I stayed after the reading again. Jamie locked up, and we walked to a late-night coffee shop where we talked until the barista started pointedly wiping nearby tables. Weekly readings became twice-weekly visits. Jamie recommended books that seemed hand-picked for parts of me I hadn't spoken aloud. I found myself looking forward to our conversations with an intensity that scared me. Winter deepened around Boston. December brought wet snow that turned quickly to gray slush. The Christmas lights strung across Newbury Street reflected in puddles, blurred and beautiful. I wandered the bookstore more often, finding excuses to stay until closing. Jamie never pushed, never pressed. He shared pieces of himself in casual fragments: his childhood in Minnesota, his college years studying literature with plans to teach before the bookstore idea took root. 3 weeks into our whatever it was, he mentioned Chicago for the first time. "I was there for almost 8 years," he said as we huddled under the awning of a closed flower shop, waiting for a sudden downpour to ease. "Married for 6 of them." My breath caught. I looked at him sideways through the curtain of rain. "Oh, it ended 2 years before I moved here." Jamie's voice remained steady, but his fingers tightened around his coffee cup. "Elizabeth was a professor at Northwestern. We met at a faculty mixer. I was teaching part-time then. It was good until it wasn't. I wanted to ask more but feared the questions might turn back on me. Instead, I nodded, watching his profile against the darkened street. "She had an affair with a colleague," he continued, surprising me. "Someone in her department. I found out when I overheard them at a university function." A rueful half-smile crossed his face. "Not exactly a dignified way to discover your marriage is over." I thought of hospital rooms, of waking up alone. There's no dignified way. "No, I guess not." He turned toward me. "Anyway, I stayed another year trying to restart my life there, but everything felt contaminated. Every coffee shop, every bookstore, even the lake. So I came here. Fresh start." The rain slackened. We stepped from under the awning and continued walking. Our shoulders brushed. Accident or intention, I couldn't tell. "What about you?" he asked finally. "Were you always in Boston?" I swallowed hard. "More or less. Grew up in Brookline, went to college at BU. Nothing exciting." Jamie's eyes met mine, curious but not demanding. Somehow I doubt that. I changed the subject. January came with brutal cold. The Charles River partially froze, thick plates of ice pushing against each other along the shoreline. Jamie and I developed a routine: Tuesday readings, Thursday dinners, weekend afternoons exploring whatever indoor spaces would shield us from the wind cutting between buildings. The MFA's warm galleries, the greenhouse at the Botanic Garden, the underground mall at Prudential Center. We talked about books, films, music. I learned he had a weakness for 80s power ballads and couldn't cook anything beyond basic pasta. He discovered my collection of vintage typewriters and my habit of alphabetizing my spice rack. We circled each other's lives, creating patterns of connection while I carefully guarded the hollow space where Tyler had been. When Jamie mentioned past relationships, I redirected. When his hand brushed against my waist, I shifted slightly away. The scar along my side, a jagged 7-inch reminder of what I'd given and lost, remained hidden beneath high-waisted jeans and dresses that never came off when he was near. One Thursday night in late January, after we'd known each other for 2 months, Jamie suggested a restaurant in the North End, a tiny Italian place tucked between larger, more popular establishments. "Their carbonara will change your life," he promised, as we navigated the narrow streets. Old brick buildings leaned toward each other over cobblestones slick with melting snow. The air smelled of garlic and yeast and sea. Inside Giacomo's, heat enveloped us. The cramped space held maybe 15 tables, each covered with red checkered cloth and crowded with mismatched wine glasses. The walls were lined with bottles and framed black and white photos of Italian landscapes. No menus, just a waiter who recited options with rapid-fire precision. Jamie ordered in decent Italian, which he'd never mentioned knowing. When I raised an eyebrow, he grinned. 3 semesters in college. About all I remember is food vocabulary and how to ask where the bathroom is. We split a bottle of Montepulciano. The wine loosened something in me, not enough to talk about Tyler, but enough to let Jamie's fingers tangle with mine across the table. His thumb traced circles on my palm while we ate pasta so rich it made my eyes close in pleasure. "Good?" he asked, watching me. I nodded, throat too full for words. After dinner, the cold air hit us like a slap. I shivered, and Jamie wrapped an arm around my shoulders. We walked like that through the winding streets, past Paul Revere's house and the Old North Church, history pressed against our modern concerns. "I'll walk you home," he said, not a question. The subway would have been faster, but we walked anyway. The city stretched around us in its winter quiet. Fewer tourists, fewer students, just the steady beat of local life continuing between snowfalls. By the time we reached my building in Back Bay, my cheeks burned from cold and my legs ached. At my door, Jamie hesitated. We'd never defined what was happening between us. The moment stretched, taut with possibility. "Thank you for dinner," I said, staring at the faded brass numbers on my door instead of his face. Emily? His voice dropped lower. When I looked up, his eyes were serious, intent. He stepped closer, giving me time to back away. I didn't. His hand came up to brush my hair from my face. I'd really like to kiss you. The directness startled a laugh from me. That's refreshingly straightforward. I found it's better than ambushing people. His smile crinkled the corners of his eyes. I nodded, unable to form words. His lips met mine, gentle at first, then with growing certainty. His hand cradled the back of my neck, thumb resting below my ear, where my pulse hammered. I leaned into him, tasting wine and possibility. Then his other hand slid down my side, innocent but dangerous, too close to where damaged skin mapped my biggest mistake. The scar seemed to burn through layers of clothing. Tyler's voice echoed in my head. I never asked you to do this for me. I jerked back, breaking contact. I can't, I'm sorry. Confusion flickered across Jamie's face, followed by concern. Did I do something wrong? No, it's not you. I can't do this right now. His hands dropped to his sides. Okay, that's okay. But it wasn't okay. I fumbled with my keys, unable to look at him. I should go in. Emily, thanks again for dinner. Good night, Jamie. I shut the door quickly, then leaned against it, listening to his hesitation on the other side. After a long moment, his footsteps retreated down the hallway. I didn't sleep that night. The kiss replayed endlessly. Not just the warmth of his mouth, but the moment of panic that followed. I knew I'd overreacted, but I couldn't explain without revealing everything. By morning, I decided to text him an apology, maybe suggest we take things slower. But when I reached for my phone, I found a message already waiting. I'm going to be at the Esplanade around 2 this afternoon if you want to talk. No pressure. Either way, I'm sorry if I crossed a line. The consideration in those words undid me. I texted back, I'll be there. The February day was unexpectedly mild, one of those false spring days New England offers as both apology and taunt. The snow along the river had mostly melted, leaving the paths clear. I spotted Jamie on a bench facing the water, his profile calm against the urban backdrop. He saw me approaching and stood. Thanks for coming. We walked in awkward silence until the tension became unbearable. I'm sorry about last night, I blurted. You don't need to apologize. I do, though. You didn't do anything wrong, and I reacted badly. Jamie stopped walking and turned to face me. Emily, whatever's happening here, he gestured between us. It only works if we're both comfortable. You weren't. End of story. The simplicity of his understanding broke something loose inside me. Words I'd been holding back for months, suddenly pushed forward, demanding release. I need to tell you something. I sat on a nearby bench. After a moment's hesitation, he joined me, leaving space between us. I stared at the river, where thin plates of ice still clung to the edges. The water reflected bare tree branches and the gray-blue February sky. Joggers passed. A woman walked a small dog wearing a ridiculous plaid sweater. Normal life continuing while I prepared to excavate the past. I was with someone before, I began. His name was Tyler. We were together for almost 3 years. Jamie nodded, waiting. He got sick. The words felt inadequate for the terror of those days. The yellowing of Tyler's skin, the doctor's concerned faces, the diagnosis of kidney disease accelerating faster than anyone expected. He needed a transplant. I was a match. Jamie's intake of breath was sharp, but he didn't interrupt. I offered without hesitation. It seemed obvious. If you love someone, you help them when they need it, right? My laugh sounded brittle even to me. The surgery went fine. They take the kidney out laparoscopically now, just a few small incisions and one larger one. Very routine, they said. I swallowed hard, tracing the hidden path of my scar through my coat. I recovered at my parents' house. Tyler stayed with his sister. We talked every day while he got stronger. I thought we were planning our future. A pair of ducks skimmed across the water's surface, landing with twin splashes. 3 weeks after the surgery, he came to see me, told me he'd been reconsidering our relationship even before he got sick. Said he felt obligated to me now. The bitterness of that word still coated my tongue. He left that day. I haven't seen him since. Jamie was very still beside me. He got a job in Seattle, moved across the country with my kidney, and didn't look back. I wrapped my arms around myself. The worst part wasn't even losing him. It was realizing that what I thought was love, this deep, meaningful connection, was something he could just discard, like it meant nothing. Emily, I have a scar. The words tumbled out. It reminds me every day of what happened. That's why I pulled away last night. Your hand was... and I just couldn't. Jamie shifted closer, his shoulder touching mine. Thank you for telling me. When someone leaves after you've literally given them a piece of yourself, my voice cracked. It makes it hard to believe in anything. I can imagine. He paused. Actually, no, I can't. What happened to you was incredibly painful in every sense. I won't pretend to understand exactly how that feels. The honesty in his voice made me look up. His eyes held none of the pity I'd feared. But I will tell you this, he continued. What you did shows extraordinary courage and capacity for love. That he couldn't honor that gift says everything about him and nothing about you. A boat cut through the water, leaving ripples that expanded toward the shore. We watched them reach the concrete edge and break. The part that scares me, I admitted, is that I still don't regret the donation itself. Even knowing how it ended, I'd make the same choice. What does that say about me? Jamie turned to face me fully. It says you're someone who loves completely. That's not weakness, Emily. Anyone would be lucky to be loved by someone like you. The simple truth of his words penetrated layers of shame I'd wrapped around myself. For months, I'd seen my scar as evidence of failure, proof that I'd given too much to someone who valued it too little. But Jamie saw it differently. In his eyes, my choice reflected strength, not foolishness. I can't promise I'm ready for whatever this is, I said, gesturing between us like he had earlier. I'm not asking for promises, just honesty. He hesitated, then added, and maybe dinner next Thursday? A smile tugged at my lips. I can probably manage that. He didn't try to kiss me again that day. We walked along the river until the sun began to set, and the February chill returned. But when he reached for my hand, I didn't pull away. For the first time since waking up in that hospital room, the scar along my side felt less like a brand of naivety and more like proof of my capacity to heal. Not just tissue and skin, but something deeper. The damage remained, a permanent part of me, but like the boat in Jamie's poem, I was still afloat, still moving forward through waters both calm and turbulent. As we turned back toward the city skyline, I realized I wasn't defined by what I'd lost. Perhaps instead, I was shaped by what remained, the ability to trust again, to risk again, even knowing the storms that might come. The first crocuses pushed through the soil in the public garden as March gave way to April. I watched them from a bench near the pond where the swan boats would soon return, Jamie's arm draped casually around my shoulders. The winter's ice had melted completely now, leaving only memories of our walks along the frozen Charles. I used to hate spring in Boston, I said, tracking a squirrel as it darted up a nearby oak tree. All that slush and mud before anything actually blooms. Jamie's fingers traced idle patterns on my shoulder. And now? Now it feels right. The mess before the beauty. I leaned into him, no longer flinching when his hand brushed near my side. 3 months had passed since our conversation by the river. 3 months of careful steps forward, dinners that lasted until restaurants closed around us, afternoons spent browsing used bookstores in Cambridge, mornings waking to texts that made me smile before my feet hit the floor. We moved slowly, both of us carrying our own histories of hurt. The next Tuesday at the bookstore's reading circle, an older man with wire-rimmed glasses read Mary Oliver's Wild Geese. The line about the soft animal of your body loving what it loves caught in my throat. I glanced at Jamie across the circle, finding his eyes already on me. Something warm and certain passed between us. After everyone left, I helped Jamie straighten chairs and shelve the books people had browsed but not purchased. My place? He asked as he locked the front door. It had become our habit, takeout and conversation at his apartment above the bookstore. A small but comfortable space lined with even more books than the shop below. That night, as spring rain tapped against his windows, we moved past the careful boundaries we'd maintained. His bed was narrower than I'd expected, forcing our bodies close under the rumpled quilt. His hands found the places that made me gasp, except the one spot I still kept hidden under a tank top I didn't remove. Is this okay? He whispered against my neck, attuned to the way I tensed when his fingers strayed near my left side. Yes, I breathed. Just not there. Not yet. He nodded and shifted his touch elsewhere, respecting the boundary without question. In that moment of acceptance, something cracked open in me. A realization that vulnerability didn't have to mean pain. The following week, I called Dr. Marshall's office. The receptionist sounded surprised to hear from me after 6 months of canceled appointments. "She has an opening next Thursday at 4, she said. "I'll take it." The waiting room hadn't changed. Same muted blue walls, same stack of outdated magazines, same faint smell of lavender essential oil. I picked at a loose thread on my sleeve, wondering if coming back had been a mistake. Dr. Marshall greeted me with the same calm smile, her silver-streaked hair pulled back in its usual neat bun. She didn't mention my absence, just settled into her chair and asked, "What brings you back, Emily?" "I met someone," I said, the words falling out awkwardly. "His name is Jamie." "And how does that feel?" I considered this, trying to name the tangle of emotions. Terrifying, good, complicated. For the next 50 minutes I talked about Jamie, about the bookstore, about our slow-building relationship. I talked about Tyler too, how the anger had faded but the fear remained. Fear of being left, fear of giving too much, fear of the scar that marked both my body and my history. "Have you told Jamie about the transplant?" Dr. Marshall asked. "Yes, but I haven't shown him the scar." "What do you think would happen if you did?" I stared at my hands. "I don't know. That's what scares me." Dr. Marshall made a note. "Sometimes the fear of vulnerability is worse than vulnerability itself." I left with a familiar prescription for weekly sessions and a less familiar sense of possibility. April warmed into May. Jamie and I established rhythms. Tuesday readings, Thursday therapy, with dinner after. Weekends exploring the city as it shook off winter. We wandered through the Gardner Museum, where light filtered through the courtyard's glass ceiling and cast patterns on ancient sculptures. We ate cannoli in the North End, powdered sugar dusting our clothes. We found a hidden jazz club in Somerville where musicians played until 2 a.m., and we swayed together in the back corner, his hand steady on my waist. One rainy Saturday, we spent hours in bed, reading passages from our favorite books aloud. Jamie's voice wrapped around Whitman's words. We were together, I forget the rest, and I pressed my face into his shoulder, overcome by how simple and complicated love could be. I was learning him piece by piece. The way he tugged his earlobe when thinking, how he alphabetized his books but left his clothes in unfolded piles, the small scar on his chin from a childhood bicycle accident, the coffee he brewed so strong it made my teeth ache, his patient silence when I needed space, his laughter that seemed to start in his chest and work its way up. My parents asked about Sunday dinner again, I said one evening as we cooked together in his tiny kitchen. I chopped vegetables while he stirred pasta sauce, our elbows bumping in the limited space. Jamie glanced over. "And I told them yes, for both of us, if you want." He turned fully toward me, wooden spoon dripping sauce onto the floor. "You're sure?" I wasn't, not completely. I hadn't brought anyone home since Tyler. My parents had visited him in the hospital after the surgery, had watched me crumble when he left. They'd tried to help but hadn't known how, their concern manifesting as awkward phone calls and occasional grocery deliveries left outside my door when I wouldn't answer. "I'm sure," I said, surprising myself with how true it felt. Sunday dinner in my childhood home in Brookline was an exercise in contained chaos. Mom fluttered around the kitchen, asking too many questions and not waiting for answers. Dad grilled Jamie about the economics of running an independent bookstore. How do you compete with Amazon? While showing him his collection of first editions, my younger brother Noah, home from college for the weekend, rolled his eyes at our parents' obvious excitement about meeting someone new in my life. I watched Jamie navigate it all with genuine interest and good humor. He discussed profit margins with Dad, complimented Mom's garden visible through the kitchen window, and talked basketball with Noah. When Mom brought out the photo albums, ignoring my protests, he studied each embarrassing childhood picture with delight. "You had a bowl cut," he whispered, nudging me as we sat side by side on the couch. "Shut up," I muttered, but I was smiling. Later, as we walked from the tea station back to my apartment, Jamie took my hand. "Your family's great. They were on their best behavior. Noah didn't even mention the time I threw up on his science project. I like seeing where you came from." He squeezed my fingers. "Thanks for bringing me." Sunday dinners became a regular occurrence. Spring advanced, trees leafing out fully, tulips giving way to irises along Commonwealth Avenue. Jamie and I settled into a comfortable intimacy, yet I still kept one part of myself hidden, changing in bathrooms, wearing tanks under t-shirts, keeping the lights off when we made love. Dr. Marshall called it the last fortress, the final piece of vulnerability I hadn't surrendered. What would happen, she asked during a session in early June, if Jamie rejected your scar? I traced the pattern on her office couch. It would confirm what I feared, that I'm too damaged, too marked by the past. And if he didn't reject it? I had no answer. The question followed me through the week, nagging at moments when Jamie's touch seemed to ask for more than I gave. On Thursday, we planned to meet at a new restaurant near Copley Square. I arrived early and decided to pick up a few things at the grocery store across the street. I was examining peaches in the produce section, testing their ripeness between my fingers, when a voice behind me said, "Emily?" For a moment, I didn't recognize him. Tyler's hair was shorter, his face leaner than I remembered. He wore a button-down shirt open at the collar, looking both familiar and like a stranger. Tyler. His name felt strange in my mouth after so long. "How are you?" he asked, shifting the basket in his hands. I waited for the rush of feeling, anger, hurt, longing, something, but there was only a hollow sort of recognition, like seeing an actor from a show you used to watch. "I'm good," I said, and meant it. "What brings you back to Boston?" "Work conference." He gestured vaguely. "Just a quick trip. I'm still in Seattle." "Right." Silence stretched between us. Once, this man had known every inch of me. Once, I'd given him a piece of my body to save his life. Now we stood among vegetables and fruit, separated by more than physical distance. "You look well," he offered. "Thanks, how's the kidney?" The question emerged without bitterness, just curiosity. He touched his side unconsciously. "Good. No rejection issues." I nodded, wondering if he heard the irony in his words. "Listen, Emily, I've wanted to say—" "I have to go," I cut him off. "I'm meeting someone." A flicker of something, regret perhaps, crossed his face. "Of course, it was good to see you." I turned away before he could say more, leaving the peaches and walking to the exit without buying anything. Outside on the street, I paused, waiting for the emotional aftershock. But instead of pain, I felt a strange lightness, as if an invisible weight I'd been carrying had finally lifted. Jamie noticed something different as soon as I met him at the restaurant. "Everything okay?" I ran into Tyler, his fork clattered against his plate. "Where? Just now?" "At the grocery store across the street." I speared a piece of ravioli, oddly calm. "It was fine." "Fine?" Jamie's eyebrows rose. I thought seeing him would destroy me, that I'd feel all the hurt again, or anger, or something big. I twirled pasta on my fork, watching the steam rise. But I felt nothing. Well, not nothing. More like indifference. Like he's just someone I used to know. Jamie studied me carefully. "That's good, right?" "It's better than good. It's freedom." That night, back at my apartment, I stood in front of the bathroom mirror. I lifted my shirt and traced the scar that curved along my left side. 7 inches of slightly raised tissue, pinker than the surrounding skin. For so long, I'd seen it only as evidence of what I'd lost. But staring at it now, I recognized something else. Proof of my capacity for love. Proof that even when that love wasn't returned as I deserved, I survived. Jamie was reading in bed when I emerged from the bathroom. I'd left the lights on. He looked up, his eyes questioning as I stood beside the bed. "I want to show you something," I said, my voice steadier than I felt. He set the book aside. Slowly, deliberately, I raised the hem of my t-shirt, exposing the curved line of the scar. Jamie's eyes followed my movement, his expression serious but not pitying. "This is where they took my kidney," I said. "For Tyler." Jamie nodded, waiting. For a long time I couldn't look at it without feeling like a fool, like it was a mark of shame, proof that I'd given a piece of myself to someone who didn't value it. I sat on the edge of the bed. Jamie remained still, giving me space to finish. But today, seeing Tyler, I realized something. This scar doesn't represent what I lost. It represents what I'm capable of. The fact that I could love someone that completely, even if he didn't deserve it, means I have that capacity. And that's not something to hide. Jamie reached out slowly, his fingertips hovering near the scar, but not touching it. "May I?" I nodded. His touch was gentle as he traced the line from end to end. I fought the urge to pull away, to cover myself. "It's beautiful," he said quietly. I started to object, but he continued. "Not because of how it looks, but because of what it means, what it says about you." His eyes met mine. "Thank you for showing me." He leaned down and pressed his lips to the scar, a gesture so tender it brought tears to my eyes. "If you ever give me any part of yourself," he murmured against my skin, "I promise I'll treasure it." I believed him. The following weekend, we wandered through the public garden, where swan boats now glided across the pond and tourists posed beside the make-way for duckling statues. Children chased pigeons across the grass. An elderly couple shared an ice cream cone on a bench beneath flowering trees. We found a quiet spot near the water. Jamie seemed nervous, his hand tapping rhythms against his thigh. "What's wrong?" I asked. "Nothing's wrong." He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small brass key attached to a bookmark-shaped keychain. "I wanted to ask you something." My pulse quickened as he placed the key in my palm. "This is to my apartment," he said. "I was hoping, that is, if you wanted, you could consider making it your apartment too." His words tumbled out faster than usual. "Your lease is up next month, and we spend most nights together anyway, and I know it's not as nice as your place, but—" I closed my fingers around the key. "Are you asking me to move in with you?" He ran a hand through his hair. "Yes. Badly, apparently." A group of children ran past, chasing a ball that bounced toward the pond. Nearby, a street musician played something soft and meandering on a violin. "It's not the most romantic proposal," Jamie continued, filling my silence. "Living above a bookstore has its downsides. Strange hours, the smell of old paper everywhere, customers who don't realize where the store ends and our home begins." "Yes," I interrupted. Yes, I'll move in with you." I pressed the key between my palms, feeling the metal warm against my skin. "Even with the weird hours and nosy customers." His smile broke across his face, relief and joy mingling. "You're sure?" "I'm sure." And I was. This wasn't a fairy tale ending where all problems disappeared. Moving in together wouldn't erase my occasional nightmares or silence the voice that sometimes whispered I didn't deserve happiness. It wouldn't stop Jamie's bookstore from struggling against online competition or prevent our inevitable arguments about whose turn it was to wash dishes. But it was a conscious choice to build something real, to take the broken pieces of our past experiences and construct something new that honored rather than erased them. As we walked back toward the bookstore that afternoon, my hand in his and the key tucked safely in my pocket, I realized that I hadn't lost anything that mattered when Tyler left. I had gained clarity about what genuine love looked like, not dramatic sacrifice or painful devotion, but mutual respect and daily kindness. My heart hadn't been broken beyond repair. It had been preparing me for something better. The scar on my side was just that, a mark of healing, of tissue that had knit itself back together, different than before but whole in its own way.